Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on back. In this one today, we're going to be ranking every weapon in World at War from worst to best. We won't be including wonder weapons on this list, and this is also going to be my personal favorites when it comes to the game. So without a further ado, let's get right into it. Coming in as the worst gun in World at War, we have the Springfield. Now, this should come as no surprise to anyone. Not only is it the worst weapon when it comes to World at War, but it could possibly be the worst weapon when it comes to zombies in general. It does little to no damage that by round 2 you're gonna need to be shooting multiple rounds into a zombie to kill them. The iron sights are also slightly off with this weapon, so you have to aim slightly to the right in order to land your bullets. The only redeeming factor is that it's a wall weapon, so you can always buy more ammo, but other than that, it's a super horrible gun. Next up, we have the Arisaka. Now, this weapon is only exclusive to Shinonuma, and overall, it's not a horrible weapon, but it's not that good either. The damage is okay for a starting weapon at least, so is the fire rate. The problem with this weapon is that it isn't pack-a-punchable because it's not on Derice, so there's no reason to buy this weapon for later round gameplay. In the earlier rounds, it can get you by up until about round 4 or 5, but after that, you're better off using a knife or buying a new weapon. Moving into our next weapon, we have the Kar98K. Stat-wise, it's pretty much the same as the Arisaka, but it's on more maps. It looks and sounds cooler as well, and you can actually pack-a-punch it because it's on Derice. After pack-a-punching it to the Armageddon, it doesn't get that much better. I still wouldn't use it for higher rounds because there are just so many better options, but since it does have some slight advantages over the Arisaka, I'm gonna put the Kar98K right above it. Now, coming up next, we have the Kar98K with the scope. It actually does a little bit more damage than the normal Kar, but it has a horrible scope that is annoying to use and handle. Whenever a gun in zombies has a scope, it usually isn't that great because all it does is make the ease of use a lot worse. But I have to put it above the Kar because it does technically do more damage, and the accessibility for these two are about the same since they are both wall weapons. And coming up next, we have the Panzerschreck. Now, when it comes to overall power, this is actually one of the better weapons in the game. The problem is that 9 times out of 10, you're gonna end up downing yourself with this gun because in World at War, you don't have PhD. And with this gun, it's not like the Helion Salvo where it doesn't do much self-inflicted damage to the player. This gun will instantly down you with one shot if you don't have Jug. So while on paper it is a really good weapon, in practical use it's one of the worst. Now moving into our next weapon, we have the PTRS. I'm not a huge fan of sniper rifles in zombies. The only two that I would ever use are the SVU and the Draken in Black Ops 3. When it comes to the PTRS, it's a very similar situation to the Panzerschreck, where on paper it seems like a really solid weapon to use, but in terms of practicality and ease of use, it just isn't a viable weapon to use in zombies. The scope is really annoying, the reload speed and movement speed are also really slow, a good weapon for dealing high damage, but in World at War there really isn't a situation in which you would need to deal a large amount of damage. Moving up next on our list, we have the Gewehr. Now, this weapon is my go-to when it comes to starting room weapons. It's really cheap, it does a decent amount of damage for a starting room gun, and the fire rate is also really high. I like this weapon in particular because it's easy to shoot a zombie a couple of times and then knife them to fully maximize points. Overall, this gun just makes for a really good starting weapon. I can't put it higher because there are just better guns in general, and outside of being a starting weapon, it's not that great. Coming up next, we have the M1A1 Carbine. This gun is very similar to the Gewehr. They cost the same amount of points, do the same damage, and have about the same fire rate. I like this one more solely from an aesthetic aspect. On paper, these two guns are pretty much the same. The M1A1 is just a solid gun. It doesn't do anything amazing, nor does it do anything bad. I could use this gun up to round 10, but after that, I'd probably pick up something else. Now next up we have the M1 Garand. Now out of all the 3 600 point starting weapons, this one is by far my favorite. Shooting and reloading this weapon is the most satisfying thing ever. The damage is great, the fire rate is great, a good weapon for any high round in the early double digits, probably up to round 10. The mobility is solid as well, only downside is that there are better guns. This weapon is one of the most iconic in all of Zombies, and one of the most iconic for World at War. Next up, we have the M1 with grenade launcher. This is just the normal M1 Garand with a grenade launcher attachment. Again, in World at War, you have PhD, so the grenade launcher isn't going to be too helpful. The normal gun you can shoot is alright. I would use this weapon up until round 10 when I can comfortably buy a new weapon. The grenade launcher in general isn't that strong, but I guess it's better to have it than to not have it. Coming up next, we have the Magnum. Now, compared to every other gun that we've talked about so far, this gun has a huge advantage when it comes to mobility. It's a great gun to quickly shoot zombies out of your way if you're training in the later rounds. It can be a bit clunky to use, but overall the damage is really solid. So is the ammo. Out of all the normal pistols that shoot bullets in zombies, this is one of the best. It just feels fun to use most pistols like the Magnum in Zombies, since they are all generally really solid with damage and mobility. Moving into our next weapon, we have the double barrel shotgun. This weapon hits really hard, but only twice before you have to reload. That's its only downside. You can pack a punch it to help with that 2-shot problem, but it still won't help out too much. If you have Speed Cola, this can be a really solid weapon to train around with if you need to shoot zombies out of your way, but if you want to accomplish anything else like taking down huge hordes or getting points, there are a ton of better guns that are going to be more effective. Next up, we have the sawed-off double barrel, literally the same gun as the normal double barrel with a bit of improved mobility, and I guess it looks cooler. Coming up next, we have the Type 100. This is going to be our first fully automatic weapon on this list, and I could easily argue as to why it is the worst. The damage isn't too great compared to other phenomenal SMGs that we're going to talk about later on this list, but it just isn't that good with ammo or accessibility either. I also don't like how this gun kinda tilts to the side when you ADS, it just looks really dumb. Overall, on paper, in terms of practicality, the Type 100 is the worst SMG in the game, but still a really solid weapon. Now moving into our next weapon, we have the STG-44. If we're talking about the Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 3 version of this weapon, I'd be putting it much higher up on the list, but in World at War, this gun just isn't that good. It shoots a little bit faster than some of the other versions, but the recoil and damage just isn't that great. You can definitely get by with this weapon, but in terms of box guns, there are a ton of better options. Moving into our next gun, we have the FG-42. Now, this weapon is really solid when it comes to the fire rate and ammo. The damage is where it kind of lacks a bit. Still better than some of the other weapons on this list, but overall, it just isn't that great, especially compared to other LMGs and assault rifles in this game. There's also a ton of visual recoil with this weapon, which can be really annoying to use. On paper, it's really good, but when it comes to ease of use, there once again are a lot of better options. Coming up next, we have the MP40. Always a super reliable weapon, it doesn't matter what game you're playing. Great when it comes to points, it can carry you to the early 20s. The ammo is phenomenal. The damage could do a little bit better, but it wouldn't be known as the great point weapon that it is if it did, so I guess I can let that slide. Overall, a really solid weapon. Unfortunately, still not one of the best when it comes to SMGs, because this game has incredible SMGs, but this one is really close. Next up, we have the trench gun. This gun serves one simple purpose, and that is to destroy hellhounds on Der Riese. That's what it's mainly known for, and what it's mainly good at. You do have multiple shots, so you can take down more zombies than if you were using a double barrel. The damage, ammo, accessibility, and ease of use are very solid, but unfortunately, with it being a shotgun, it isn't that good with points or consistency, since you have to be pretty close up. Now, coming up next, we have the bar. A lot of people like to hate on this weapon, and I don't know why. The mobility might not be the best, but it's the most consistent when it comes to ammo, damage, and the fire rate. It's also incredibly common being a wall weapon on almost every map in this game. The deployable bar on Verrückt is a super bad option, but the normal bar is great, a solid weapon for getting points and kills in the later rounds. Coming up next, we have the M1911. Now, this is the main starting pistol for World at War, meaning that for the most part, it won't be that effective. But if you pack-a-punch it, you can get a really good explosive weapon with a lot of mobility. Now, it can still be super dangerous to use because there is no PhD on World at War, but the reload and movement speed is really solid to justify using this weapon. It's easy to access because you spawn in with it, and you can greatly increase the firepower once you pack-a-punch it. Moving into our top 5, up next we have the flamethrower. Now, when it comes to high rounds, there is no better weapon to have, especially on a map like Noct where there's no traps or infinite damaging wonder weapons. It has infinite ammo, which is really nice. You don't have to constantly hit the box for a new weapon. When it comes to the damage, it isn't the best, and with the cooldown, it doesn't make for the best weapon if you just want to get to a reasonable round below round 50. Regardless, this is a must-have if you're going for any high round attempt on World at War. At our number 4 spot, we have the Thompson. This SMG is just amazing. When it comes to high round reliable weapons, the Thompson is always a super great pick. It has a good amount of ammo, the damage is really solid, the fire rate is high enough that you can kill zombies in the later rounds without having to sacrifice the loss in points. It is a wall weapon on every single map in this game, making the accessibility really good as well. Not only that, but it's also great when it comes to mobility and recoil. It's easy to control and move around, making it an all-around solid weapon for this game. Now, coming into our number 3 spot, we have the Browning. This gun is really good for high rounds and camping. LMGs in this game are really solid because of the high amount of damage and ability to make points. If you sit on the catwalk with this weapon, you're guaranteed to get to a pretty decently high round. Now, when it comes to LMGs in general, the mobility is a bit lacking and the Browning is no exception. But if we're talking about pure firepower, this is one of the best guns that you can get. Moving into our number 2 spot, we have another LMG that releases the same firepower as the Browning, but without any of the mobility defects. The MG42 is a great weapon for camping, but it does also show great potential for training as well, since the mobility and reload speed is a little bit faster than the Browning. It has all the great things about an LMG like high damage, rate of fire, and the ammo. I have no complaints with this weapon whatsoever, and the only reason it's not coming into our number 1 spot is because there's one more weapon that I think is better. And with our number 1 spot, we have the PPSH. This weapon is everything you would ever want in a COD Zombies weapon. The mobility is great since it's an SMG. Now, when it comes to the damage, it might not be as good as the LMGs, but it makes up for that by having a ridiculous fire rate. And to make up for the super fast fire rate, it has a ton of ammo. The only downside with this weapon is that it's only a box gun, but with the amount of ammo that you get without pack-a-punch, you most likely won't ever need to buy another weapon for a long period of time. The PPSH is the perfect weapon for COD Zombies and is deserving of being considered the best in this game. Anyways guys, it's going to wrap up the video for today. If you did enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, do all that. Leave your comments down below if you want to see me do any other type of content. Check down the description as well for more zombie related videos. And yeah, I got nothing much else to say, so peace.